Welcome to Holy Temple Church of God in Christ, 1517 Walnut Drive, Cheyenne, Wyoming, where we believe that loving God and loving people yields winning souls and changed lives.
Good morning, everyone. This is April 19, 2020, and I'm Deacon Fennell coming to teach the Sunday school lesson this morning. And this lesson is titled Lesson 8, and the title is Injustice Will Be Punished. In the Bible basis, coming out of Esther chapter 7, verse 1 through 10. Esther pleads for King Xerxes to save her people from Haman. Memory verse, so they hang Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then was the king wrath pacified. Esther 7 and 10. Lesson aim. By the end of the lesson, we will the story of Esther as a triumph of justice. Identify that the treachery and the wickedness would not win, and choose to act justly in every situation with the assurance that good triumphs over evil. Background scriptures, Esther 3, 5, and 7 chapters. And this lesson is starting out with verse chapter 7, verse 1. And I'm going to read the introduction. The light of the word. In Jewish community, the book of Esther is read every year during the festivity of Purim, which commemorates the story. Internally, the book of Esther does not mention God's name in any of its 10 chapters. God is not seen or heard to offer direct guidance to anyone. When Esther called for a period of fasting, no direct reference to prayer is made. Esther 4 and 15. Even though it was canonized with the rest of the scriptures during the middle of the first millennium AD, the first Christian commentary of the book of Esther did not appear until the 9th century. Consequently, some outside of the Christian community have critical questioned the book. Esther used for revealing the nature of God was clearly evident to the Christian community and did not dampen the book's capacity to encourage Christian believers to defend what is morally right. And in the introduction, in this passage, we find Esther making her plea to the king. The story of Esther began in 48 BC, which is 103 years after King Nebuchadnezzar took Jewish people into captivity. Mordecai's family went into exile from Jerusalem because of King Nebuchadnezzar. Even as King Cyrus allowed them to return, many Jews stayed and lived in Persia because they experienced great freedom. And I'm going to stop at that. Even though they was free to go back to Jerusalem, they stayed pretty much in Babylon, in Persia, because they was treated well. They didn't want to leave the area they was at because they was getting treated well where they was at. But if you go back, when you're studying Esther to tie into this lesson, you have to go back to chapter 1 and how all this began. And all this began by the king's first wife refusing to show off her beauty amongst his guests. She refused to come when the king called, and therefore, by her not coming when the king called, he called out a decree to all the land that all women should obey their husband all over the nation that he controlled over. And during that time, his council came up with an idea that they found young virgin to suit the king, young beautiful virgin, and this is where Esther comes in at. Esther comes in as she was Mordecai's niece. Mordecai was her uncle, and Mordecai raised her up, so I guess her parents was dead, and he raised her up when she was young, not knowing her position was going to be to free the future Jews from persecution in the future. But during this time, when you go to Esther chapter 2, I'm going to start with chapter 2, and verse 7 lets you know who Esther really is. And he brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother, and the maid was far and beautiful, whom Mordecai, when her father and mother were dead, took her his own daughter. So Mordecai pretty much took his niece in because her parents were dead, and he raised her up. And then you go down to verse 22, chapter 2, verse 20 in Esther. Esther had not yet shown her kindred nor her people, as Mordecai had charged her. For Esther did the commandment of Mordecai like as when she was brought up with him. So he's telling you right there she was brought up with Mordecai. Mordecai told her not to never tell who she really is. Mordecai told her not to tell she was a Jew. I don't know, was it for her safety or what, but he told her not to tell who she was. And that's a lot of times with us, we shouldn't tell who we are until someone reveals the moment. In those days, while Mordecai sat in the king's gate, this is going back, it's going to tie into chapter 7. Two of the king's chamberlain I can't pronounce, excuse me for my pronunciation, I'm going to do the best I can with the help of the Lord. Bethan and Teresh of those who kept the door where the wrath sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. And the thing was known to Mordecai, who told it to Esther, the queen, and Esther certified the king, therefore, in Mordecai's name. Mordecai knew of a plot that two people would want to kill the king, and he told Esther about it. And Esther was chosen to be queen because she wasn't like all the rest of the women that was going into the chambers. And you go back to piggyback right here on verse 12, chapter 2, verse 17. And the king loved Esther above all the women and attained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. That was the previous queen, his old queen. So he made Esther queen because Esther had a sense of dignity and wisdom about her that no other women had at that time, and then moved the king. And the thing was known to Mordecai. See, Mordecai, you go in chapter 2 and you go to chapter 7, you notice that Haman wanted to kill Mordecai because he wouldn't bow down to him, but it was deeper than that. They had a relationship that go back to the bloodlines. They hated each other. And you go to chapter 3, and the king's servants that were in the king's gate bowed in reverence to Haman, for the king had so commanded him concerning him. But Mordecai bowed not, nor did him give him reverence. See, that's when it started right here, but it already started through the history of the bloodline. After these things did King Ahasuerus promote Haman, the son of the Hamathite, the Agagite, and advance him and set his seat above all the princes that were with him. See, it's something about the Agagites that didn't get along with the Jews. If you go back in previous verses, it was something that God told them to kill that bloodline, and they didn't do that. So therefore, that's how Haman raised up, by the people not doing what God told them in the first place. So this was the residue of that disobedience. Then you go down to verse 3. The king's servants which were in the king's gate said unto Mordecai, Why transgressest thou the king's commandment? Now it came to pass when thou spoke daily unto him, and he hearkened not unto them, that they told Haman to see whether Mordecai matters would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. And when Haman saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did he reverence, then was Haman full of wrath. And when he thought scorned to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had shown the people of Mordecai whereof Haman sought to destroy all the Jews that were throughout the whole kingdom, even the people of Mordecai. So that's Haman right there was fuming because Mordecai would not bow down to him, because the king had gave him power that everyone should pretty much bow down to him as he is king. But Mordecai defied that order and didn't bow down to him, and ever since that day that he did not bow down, that Haman came up with a plot. He came up with a conspiracy. He went to the king and tell the king it's a group of people that is out, is not listening to your decree. It's a group of people that doing what they want to do. It's a group of people that not showing you your sermon, all your power and authority. And he was telling the king all these things. And you go down to chapter 3, verse 13. And the letters were sent by post in all the king's provinces to destroy, kill, and cause perish all Jews, both young, old, little children, and women, in one day, even upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to take spoil of them for a prey. The order went out to kill all Jews, both young, old, little children, women. The order went out to kill all of the Jews. But during this time, one thing Haman didn't know, that the queen was a Jew. And it was going to come a time like this that she was going to have to fast for the people. She was going to have to stand up and stand in the gap for the Jews. And you go to chapter 4. When Mordecai perceived all that was done, Mordecai rent his clothes and put on sackcloth with ashes and went out into the midst of the city and cried with a loud voice in a bitter cry. Just something about crying out to get people attention. Mordecai went out there. Once he heard this news, he went out and cried and he tore his clothes. And that was a thing of lamentation back in those days. They show a sign of mourning by putting on sackcloth and ashes and wailing and rolling around in the dirt. And it came even for the king gate, for none might even enter into the king gate with sackcloth. Mordecai even came unto the king gate, even though nobody should enter into the king gate with sackcloth. In every province, the king commandment and his decree came. There was great mourning among the Jews, and fasting and weeping and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. It was a great cry out of the Jews. Once they heard what was finna happen to them, instead of them getting bitter, they cried out. They cried out to God. It don't say they was praying, but it say they was fasting and crying out. They was showing that they were denying their flesh. They were denying their flesh to... One thing about fasting gets you conditioned to, how can I say this? To receive God's answer. Sometimes we can't receive God's answer because our flesh is in the way, and fasting removes that desire to please ourselves in order to please God. And you go on to chapter 4. So Esther, chapter 4, verse 4. So Esther had her chamberlain came out and told her. Then was the queen exceedingly grieved, and she sent remnant to clothe Mordecai, and to take him and his sackcloth from him. But he received it not. Esther seen her uncle out there in sackcloth, and she wanted to save his dignity, or maybe save his life, because he didn't supposed to do that in the first place. He didn't supposed to be in the king's gate with sackcloth anyway. So I think Esther was trying to cover him, but Mordecai didn't want to be covered. Mordecai said, "I don't want you covering." Then Esther called for Hatat, one of the king's chamberlain, whom had appointed to attend upon her, and gave him a commandment to Mordecai to know what it was with it. So Hatat went forth to Mordecai into the street of the city, which was before the king's gate. And Mordecai told him all that had happened to him, and that some of the money that Haman had promised to pay the king's treasure for the Jews to destroy them. So it was a lot of silver given up for the heads of the Jews. That Haman had came up with a plan for the king to exterminate all Jews. Didn't matter what their age, didn't matter who they was. Also, he gave them a copy of the right of decree that was given in Shushan to destroy them, to show it unto Esther, and declare unto her, and charge her that she should go in unto the king to make supplication unto him, and to make requests before him, before the people. And that is a verse you need to write down, chapter 4 and 8. This is how it started. Mordecai gave her the same thing that he seen, and gave it to the queen to say, this is what is going on. And Hatat came and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Again, Esther spoke to Hatat and gave him a commandment to Mordecai. This is what really got me into. That's why I had to go back to chapter 1 to understand how we get to chapter 7. And all the king's servants and the people of the king's presence do know that whosoever, whether man or woman, shall come unto the king, into the inner courts, who is not called. So Esther knew. She's speaking, telling Mordecai the truth. She said, I can't go into the king's chamber without being called first. You can't just walk up into the president's office without an invitation unless you somebody. Even though she was a queen, it was a tradition then that women didn't have no power. They was pretty much servants. And through this, Esther was risen in power through her wisdom and her beauty. It's just something about using God's gift. See, God gave Esther a gift. And he gave her a gift of beauty and loveliness and wisdom. She used her beauty to become queen. She used her loveliness to persuade the king. She used her wisdom to trick Haman. Haman never knew she was a Jew because her emotion didn't get the best of her. She held a mule back to not let no one know who she was, because her uncle Mordecai told her never to tell her nationality, who she really was. And then you go right here. This is the reason Esther didn't want to go to the king. Shall come into the king in the inner court who is not called. There is one law of his to put him to death, except such to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, to that he may live. But I have not been called to come in the king these 30 days. And they told Mordecai Esther's word. Then Mordecai commanded to Esther, think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. Mordecai said, let me check you. You must have been sitting in the king's house too much. You forgot you were a Jew. Don't think that they ain't gonna kill you once they find out you a Jew. So you better get on and do what I tell you to do. Because it's a time for you to confess who you are. For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shalt thou enlarge and deliver arise the Jews from another place, but thy father's house shall be destroyed, and who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time like this? Mordecai telling her, you have came, who knows that you maybe came to the kingdom house for a time like this. So you go and ask the king, you go and stand in the gap for us, even though you might not know none of us, because you've been cut off from us since you became a queen. Go. Then Esther bade them return Mordecai this answer. Go gather together all the Jews that present in Shushan. Fast ye for me, neither eat nor drink 3 days, three days, night or day. And I also, my maidens will fast likewise, and so will I go into the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish. That is a powerful statement there. She, first of all, she said, go gather together all the Jews present in Shushan, and then fast ye for me. Neither eat nor drink 3 days. They didn't eat or drink for 3 days. And she said, if I perish, I perish. We act right now, if we fast for 1 day, we going to perish. We can't fast for no more than whatever our body allows us, because that's what we tell ourselves. We can't go on when we get hungry. But this is, then you go down to verse 5 for the sake of time. I'm going to tie all this in, chapter 5. If I have, 5 and 8, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and to please the king to grant position and to perform my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I shall prepare for them, and I will do tomorrow as the king had. Now Esther was using her wisdom here. She went to the king to play on his ego. She went to the king to act like she was going to give him a big feast for all his royal members, and she was actually setting up Haman. She was actually setting up a place. How can she go and ask the king for anything? She said, I better ask for a dinner. I better set up a banquet. I better set up something. And during this time, while she was doing this, Haman had no idea that she was a Jew. Haman had no idea that he was coming to probably the last dinner he probably eat. And to go on, before I tie into this lesson, then in verse 14, verse 11 and 5 and 11, and Haman told them of the glory of his riches. He was bragging, the multitude of his children, and the things where the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above the princes and the servants. And Haman said, moreover, ye, Esther the queen, did let no man come in the king unto the banquet that she had prepared but myself. So he was thinking like, well, she didn't let nobody else come in here but me. Not knowing that she was tricking him to make him think on his own ego that he was somebody. So he went in there thinking that, well, I'm really somebody. The queen only invited me. And Haman said, moreover, ye, Esther the queen, did not let no man come in with the king unto the banquet that she had prepared but myself. And tomorrow I am invited into her also with the king. Yet as this availeth me nothing, so as long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Then said Zechariah, his wife, and all his friends upon him, let a gallows be made of 50 cubits high. And tomorrow speak thou unto the king. Mordecai may be hanged thereon. Go therein merrily with the king. Go into the banquet. And the thing pleased Haman, and he caused the gallows to be made. Right here, Haman was preparing a place for Mordecai's death, not even understanding that was going to be his own place of rest. And you go to chapter 6, and the king said, chapter 3, what honor and dignity had thou done to Mordecai for this? Then said king's servants that minister unto them, there's nothing done for him. In chapter 6, when it started off, the king had a problem. The king couldn't sleep, so the king commanded one of his servants to read the book of Chronicles. And while he was reading that book, Mordecai came on. He remembered that Mordecai saved his life. And he asked one of his chamberlains, he said, what have we done for Mordecai? What have we done for him, that one that saved my life? What can we do for him? And this is where Haman got tricked there. This is where Haman come in, because Haman think that he talking about him. So he asked Haman also. And the king's servant said unto him, behold, Haman standing in the court. And the king said, let him come in. That's verse 6 and 5. So Haman came in, and the king said unto him, what shall be done unto the man whom the king delight honor? Now Haman thought it's his heart to whom would the king delight to do honor for than myself. So Haman thought it was him. So Haman said, answer the king, for the man whom the king delighted to honor, let the royal apparel be brought, which king used to wear. Let the horse that king ride upon, and the crown royal which sat upon. Mordecai is saying, I want everything. I want the horse to carry, the gold. I want all these things. But then you go down to verse 10. Then the king said unto Haman, make haste, take the apparel and the horse, and thou hast said, and do even so to Mordecai the Jew that sit at the king's gate. Let nothing fail, and go all that has spoken. And Mordecai came again to the king's gate, but Haman hastened his house mourning, and having his head covered. And Haman told Zeresh his wife and all his friends everything that had befallen upon him. Then said his wise men and Zeresh his wife upon him, if Mordecai be the seed of the Jews before thou hast begun to fall, thou shalt not prevail against him, but shall surely fall before him. And while they were yet talking with him, came the king chamberlain, and has to bring Haman into the banquet. And the Esther had appeared. This is where we get to chapter 7. This is where we get to the lesson. And this is where I'm going to close at for the sake of time. This is where we get to where the king, Haman, and the Esther is there. And the king said unto Esther on the second day of the banquet of the wine, what is the petition, Queen Esther? And it said, be granted thee. And what is thy request? And shall be performed even to half of the kingdom. So king was telling Esther, whatever you want, I will give you half of my kingdom. It's just something about when a woman get in a man's ear and persuades him. It's just something about when a woman is beautiful and a man can show her off. But you see what happened to his first wife, because she didn't want to be showed off. But it seemed like Esther had enough wisdom to come when the king called, and she also had enough wisdom that when the king didn't call, she came with a banquet, with a different type of idea, with something that would have pleased his ego. And the king said unto, we already went to the verse. Then Esther the queen answered and said, if I have found favor in thy sight, O king, if please the king, let my life be given me, and my petition to my people at my request. For we were sold, and I, my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to be perished. But if we have been sold for bondsmen and bondsmen, I have held my tongue, although the enemy could not countervail the king's damage. So she was playing with his psyche right there. She said, even I wouldn't even came to you if we was just been sold into being a servant, being a slave. I wouldn't even brought this to your matter. I wouldn't even brought this to your authority, because I realized that whatever your order was for us to be a slave, you meant it. But to kill us is just too much. To kill even me, your own queen, I'm a Jew. And you go down to verse 5. Then the king Ahasuerus answered and said unto Esther, the queen, who is he? Who is he that durst presume in his heart to do so? And Esther said, the adversary enemy is the wicked Haman. The Haman was afraid before the king and the queen. And the king arose from the banquet and wine, and his wrath went into the palace garden. And Haman stood to make request for his life to Esther, the queen, for he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king. Evil here means punishment. Evil here means justice. Judgment is coming down. Wrath is coming down. The king returned. So the king had to take a break. He said, what I just heard just messed up my mind, because my right hand man is trying to kill my wife. My beautiful wife haven't done anything to me. And my main man Haman said he want to kill all the Jews because of one man, Mordecai, wouldn't bow down to him. So he came up with a plot. Therefore, he went to the king to get all of them exterminated. He also went to farthest distance to build some 50 cubits high. That was 75 feet high off the ground with a spike at the top to put Mordecai on it, to hang him on it. In those traditions, hanging didn't mean how they did in the African American with the rope and lynching. Hanging was after you were dead. They cut your head off and hung you on the tree. They put you up there to display what had happened to you. Even back then they had more decent than to hang you on a rope. But to get on to this lesson, to get back into here. Then the king returned. When he returned to the place of God, he seen Haman over his wife's bed. And being already told that Haman was trying to kill his wife, so what came to his head was that Haman was trying to sexual assault his wife. He thought that Haman was trying to harm his wife. Then the king said, will he force the queen also before me in my house? The king said, will he do this? This man got some audacity. He already trying to kill her. Now he said, since I walked out to cool my mind from killing him, he got the nerve to try to sexual assault my wife. In verse 9, and Herod brought one of the chamberlains and said before the king, behold, see, that's one thing about somebody. You dig a grave for somebody else, but somebody else seen it. He said, behold, also the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman had made for Mordecai, who had spoken good for the king, standing in the house of Haman. Then the king said, hang him there on. So they hang Haman on the gallows that had prepared for Mordecai. Then was the king wrath pacified. It goes even deeper than that. As you go on to chapter 8, the king said unto Esther the queen, Mordecai the Jew, behold, I have given to Esther the house of Haman and him that hath hanged upon the gallows, because he had laid hands upon the Jews. And in verse 15, in chapter 8, and Mordecai went on from the presence of the king in royal apparel, blue and white, with a great crown of gold, with a garment of fine linen and purple, in the city of Shushan rejoicing with glad. The Jews had light and gladness and joy and honor. In every province, in every city, wheresoever the king commanded and his decree came, the Jews had joy and gladness, a feast of good day. And many of the people of the land became Jews because of the fear of the Jews that fell upon them. God had put Esther there for the Jews to come back to him, not also the Jews that was in Babylon that didn't want to come back to Jerusalem. They was called back. And even more people became Jews because they seen the power that the Jews had over the king. This is the king of Persia, modern day Iran. This is the king that, and you go back to Daniel, that Daniel was prophesying when he came in and saved them from the Babylonians. And they stayed there because it was a good place. But it come a time in everyone's life that you got to stand up with your gift. Whatever your gift is, it don't necessarily preaching or teaching. Whatever your gift God gives you for the kingdom, use it. Whatever it is, if it's beauty, ugliness, bitterness, use that to go at the devil with your bitterness. Don't use it to God's people. It is important to feel important. We matter no matter who you are. Esther didn't ever think she was going to be a queen because of her bloodline. It's a lot of things that the world says we can't be because of who we are, but I got something for you. It is important to feel important, but we matter no matter who you are. Everybody doesn't have to serve God for the same position to be effective. Beauty and loneliness was Esther's gift, and she gave it to all of the Jews. And this lesson is for all of us to understand injustice will always be punished. Justice will come. And to close this lesson, I hope everyone, for the sake of time, was able to get everything out of this lesson. But Esther stood up for her people. And by standing up, she wasn't bitter. She called on a 3-day fast. She set up a dinner to persuade the king to not kill the Jews, because Mordecai requested her to stand in the gap. And she said, remember this, people, if I die, let me die. But she still went and asked the king for permission. She asked permission for a request. And everyone have a good Sunday. Amen. God bless you all.